Welcome to another episode of the Saddle Up Show with Shaad and Destin. And boy, things pick up pretty quickly in the off season. Some major news to announce. Well, not really announce the report and just talk about and discuss because I'm sure everybody has heard the news by now, and we'll get into that later. But like we start off every show, Destin, how are you doing, my guy?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. You may see it's a little dark in here. Got the ring light on my face to try to help with it. You guys
Okay.
don't want to see what it looks like if I open this window. Let's ooh,
Oh
ooh.
wow. Oh
See,
no,
see,
no, no,
that's
no, no,
awful.
no,
See, we can't do it. We can't be doing
no.
that. We can't be doing that. But I'm doing well. I'm doing well. The news this last week. I mean, usually in the June time period, you're happy with anything coming in to be able to talk about. Definitely
Mhm.
wish this story was not one of them.
Yeah, man. And I just wanted to say, not congrats, but good journalism by you. Getting the news ahead of everybody else and putting it out there, and not just for being first, but for being accurate. Because when you're dealing with somebody livelihood, you don't want to be. You don't want to put that kind of charge on it, just anyone. So it's important to be accurate when you're delivering that kind of information, especially. So I wanted to say shout out to you, man. Congratulations on breaking that story initially, and I know your heart rate must have sped up for a little while because it always does when you break pretty much national stories. I can relate, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to get any scoops. I get that in this line of work. I mean, but man,
Hmm.
it was depressing to get like that type of news to be able to put out.
Hmm.
Like I got the tip, and I just kind of sat on it for a little bit. Like, man, this
Hmm.
sucks. And then had to put it out there. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who's been reaching out about it. Thanks to everyone who's been in the comments on every other post that
Yeah.
claimed to be first on it. To me, it doesn't really matter to be credited with being first. I'm just putting out what I get. I mean, that's really who we have been throughout this entire time that we've been covering the team. It's who I'm going to continue to be. I'm just going to continue to put out information that I am allowed to put out, and if that's helpful to you guys, make sure you guys keep following along. But some of you guys are angry individuals. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, man. Because when I initially walked out of work and I tweeted like, "Okay, what the hell is going on?" And as I was learning it in real time, he was like, "Hey, call me." And before I called you, I looked through the text messages and I was telling you, my guy said, it was Rodgers or whatever. So we both talked about it. We knew by the time we talked to each other, we had both knew it was Rodgers. And we went through a couple of players in our head that we thought it might have been, which I won't say. But after bouncing it back and forth, you confirming it with me and with other people, especially your guy that works on the inside. It was sad to say, man, but Isaiah Rodgers is looking at possible indefinite suspension or maybe even banned from the NFL, as a whole at this rate, just
That
based off the
indefinite one's
infractions.
the indefinite word is probably the minimum. I don't think. I mean, we can get into this pretty
Yeah, I
soon.
figured we just go ahead and
Yeah,
get right
so
into it.
the punishment that could come with it. Just to like break down the entire story real quick, I guess, before we get into that. So Isaiah Rodgers Sr. is under investigation. This has not been a proven fact yet, but he did put out an apology. Usually, when you put out an apology, that's a little bit of an admittance of
Of
guilt as
guilt.
well.
Yeah.
But I do respect him putting out, getting ahead of the game. He didn't have to do that. He could have waited until he was found guilty. Got ahead of the ball, did it. So I respect that from Isaiah, but he is being investigated for what the report was is over 100 total infractions. And just a little joke that me and Shot had behind things was that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of infractions.
Yes.
Over 100 infractions,
Jesus
and
Christ.
the most notable of those being that some of these bets do include Colts-related bets. There has not been any details released yet of what those Colts bets were. Currently, the reports that have been out there, and what I have heard is the bets were all positive bets for the Colts. I have not heard anything pointing towards a bet against the Colts. So for that reason, when I'm looking at the timeline, we're probably going to be looking at the indefinite suspension that we kind of saw from Calvin Ridley a while back. So we'll see that take probably the front focus of it. I don't think we see the life one unless a report comes out that there were some bets against the Colts, because then we're
Mhm.
going to be seeing everybody going through the tape last year, see how many picks he dropped, see how many blown coverages he had. That's like when the integrity of the game stuff is going to come into play,
Yeah.
and the league is not always diligent. We've seen the league mess up at times and not be on top of things.
Mhm.
But when they have been diligent is when the integrity of the league is being questioned, because they don't mess around with that. They don't. They,
Yeah.
they mess they mess around and beat around the bush on a lot of stuff. But if the integrity of their league and their game is in question, to quote Shannon Sharp, that's how you become the WWE. And you do
Yeah.
not want to be the WWE of national sports when you're an actual playing sport, not a show in a sense. And I'm a big WWE fan, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah, man. Like I talked about on Locked On Coach show with Zach, you know, it's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate. He's a good kid, but he made some stupid decisions. And I just don't want to say a singular mistake, because the difference between this and the Calvin Ridley situation was Calvin Ridley, I believe it was a singular parlay. You know,
I think it was
I
five. Five. It was
five.
five. It was
It
five
total
total.
it totaled $1,500, I believe. I
Yeah, it
think it
was
was
five.
fifteen
It
hundred.
was five total bets, and all of his Falcon based bets were in parlays. I don't know how many Falcon bets there were, but he
Oh,
got
okay.
caught on five total bets over like 3 days.
Yeah, and they're saying Isaiah Rodgers has over 100 individual bets, which is just in this. It's an insane amount, of bets that's placed. All mostly occurring between $25 to $50. They have a couple that was above, and in the low hundreds, I believe, or low thousands. I think
There was
it said.
one bet that they listed as a low 4 digit
Yeah,
infraction that he
low
has against.
thousands. So, it almost seemed like it was more of a just kind of a not a hobby, but just he likes to gamble over winning big. It seemed like it was more of a he might have an actual problem, or maybe he needs to seek out help. I don't know exactly his situation, or what it was, but what I'm not gonna do is just kill a kid, because I know how hard it is to work your life, your whole life, spend your entire existence trying to get somewhere, which most of these guys in the NFL is. Some guys are the exception, and just started playing football a couple of years ago. But most of these guys, they train their whole life to get put in these situations. Multiple people in their families have to sacrifice different things for them to get there. Uh, like I said on Locked On, I saw it firsthand with my brother. The sacrifices our family had to make, my mom made, and my dad, to get him to that level. And when you make a decision like that, it don't just affect you; it affects those people as well. I'm sure his family's crushed, by his decision making, and I know he regrets it right now. I do think this will be the last time you will see him in a Colts uniform, regardless of the outcome. I mean, it's not like Isaiah was a Gus Bradley favorite or anything like that. You know, it's just unfortunate situation all around, man. It's unfortunate, but it does open up opportunities in other places, as we're going to discuss in a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unfortunate just for the person. I mean, I've had the pleasure of being around Isaiah Rodgers a few different times in person, been able to see him interact with certain of our colleagues here at
Mhm.
Horseshoe Huddle, even. And like the guy has a good head on his shoulders. I think that was the thing that shocked me the most when I got the news first, that it was him, is just would not have guessed it from my interactions with him at all, that this would be something that he was caught up in. But we never know what's going on with anybody. So always check on your people. It's all. I just wanted to put that out there as well. But when it comes to Isaiah Rodgers, the player, now getting away from the person aspect of it, it's really unfortunate for the Colts and him, because I mean the Gus Bradley situation last year, where he wasn't being played as much as Colts fans wanted him to, is true. But he's still coming off his most snaps as a Colt.
Mm-hmm.
Had 9 starts last year at corner, the most of his entire career. Was really in line to be one of the starting outside corners, pretty much as a lock early on, at least, while they kind of let these young guys learn a little bit. Possibly even being the number one outside corner for a little bit. So had that opportunity ready for him on a contract year. When a suspension does happen, if it does happen, don't want to speak too affirmatively, but if the suspension comes that we believe will, technically his salary would just pause and the Colts would own his rights another year. When he came back, then his contract would restart up and he would not be paid on the books for this season. Now, that would be if the Colts didn't make a decision to move on from him themselves due to the severity of the claims that are in question, kind of like what Rashad was speaking to there. That's a whole other question. But with that opportunity that has been squandered here, seems, an opportunity does open. And I did write a piece about this topic, so you guys can kind of check that out there at Horseshoe Huddle as well. But we're going to kind of talk about the fact that the Colts just so happened to draft 3 corners back in April. Don't know if you guys remember or not. It's been a long, long offseason. I know now we're there in June, but the Colts drafted 3 corners: Julius Brents or Juju Brents, depending on who you talk to, in round 2, Darius Rush in round 5, and Jalen Jones in round 7. All 3 of which who I think were drafted lower than I thought they would be drafted. Guys that I had higher on my personal board than their draft slots with the Colts. And just to speak to this now, because the thought was in my head early on too, when the Colts went through the draft process, they did not have any idea about this Isaiah Rodgers situation during the draft. These guys were drafted via their play, not via the the need at corner was there with Isaiah Rodgers, let alone without him. So those picks were made without this knowledge that they could not have Isaiah Rodgers this year.
Yeah. Speaking a little bit about Juju Brents. I had a late second, early round grade on him. I was a little bit lower on him than most people, but like I said, when I evaluate, I don't evaluate specifically for coach fits. If I was evaluating based on coach fit, particularly, specifically, I would have had him as a late first, early second round guy because I believe he's that perfect of a fit for this defense. What he does well is exact. This is exactly the type of scheme that highlights that, and it's one that can minimize or hide some of his flaws. I believe he has as a player, but I think, hey, this is, I don't want to say a good thing for Juju, but Juju was already looking at potentially starting regardless of the Rodgers situation. He's probably going to be the guy that was opposite of Rodgers on the boundary. But now this just, this bumps him up even further. It pretty much solidifies his spot as a starter, unless he just comes out, the wrist injury lingers or something like that, which I can't foresee. I think he'll be 100% by training camp. But unless the injury just lingers, doesn't heal correctly, or he's just flat awful in training camp in the preseason, he'll be starting on the boundary. Let me ask you first. What do you think? What did you think of Juju as a prospect coming out of college?
Yeah, so I like Julius Brents coming out. We got to see him at the Senior Bowl, had a really
Mm-hmm.
strong week. I think his fit with the Colts was just impeccable, like you said. Looks like a carbon copy of what Gus Bradley would design at the cornerback position. Then you add in the traits that this guy has, and Chris Ballard was gonna love what this guy could be as well. I didn't think he, of the guys of that build, that he had the highest ceiling of some of them. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think he is the type of guy that I would be shocked if he wasn't a productive pro. Add that into the fact that he's an indie kid, so you're bringing a guy home, bringing a guy that the area is going to get
Are you saying
around.
you're biased? That's what
I'm
you're
not
saying?
saying. I'm not saying that. I didn't know him at all when he was up here in Indy. I'm just saying that aspect plays into it as well. You're bringing
Mm-hmm.
a guy who's going to get an entire community around him already, from the
Yeah.
day he steps on. I will say that from what I've heard from people in the building, they are not concerned at this moment that he is not going to be ready for training camp. They feel like he's going to be ready to
Mm-hmm.
go. With the OTA situation, to me, usually just because you're missing here doesn't make it an indication that something's wrong. OTAs, especially for rookies and vets, like if you're banged up at all, they don't see a reason to have you out there. They don't.
Yeah.
So for him, I feel like they're playing the risk safe. They're going to get him to training camp and let it roll. But I think he's going to be ready to go.
Yeah, a lot of times in those OTA situations, you may see the guys that show up out there for the practice sessions, but those guys are rehabbing earlier in the morning, or somewhere around the facility, putting some extra work in on their own and not with the team. Just all you may see them off to the side working with a trainer or something like that. But they're not pushing you to participate in these type of things. They want you to get back to full strength. And I think this is I think he's moving around just fine. He can run, he's jumping. It's literally just a wrist that he has a cast on. And I think he'll be back, for training camp at 100%. Another guy that this Isaiah Rodgers situation affects immensely, I think even more than Juju Brents per se. Darius Rush. I'll let you talk about Darius Rush first before I give my thoughts on him.
I've crowned myself the Darius Rush Hive leader, the train conductor.
You're not the leader, by the way. But go ahead. I'll let you talk.
I coined this prior to the draft. Everyone's coming up to speed now, though, and I appreciate you guys meeting me here. I was waiting.
You were the Killy Ringo. You were the Killy Ringo train conductor. You can't be leading two different trains. You can't.
Sure, you can. I loved this corner class in general. I mean, I feel like I was a 2023 corner class train conductor. And then the Colts drafted 3 of them. So
Destin's on all of the trains.
All of them. Hey, I'm a man of many trains, many hats.
Somebody's gonna clip that, by the way.
It happens. It happens. But when it comes to Darius Rush, I mean, we talked about the build, we talked about the athletic traits. Like, he has that fit that Julius Brents has as well. You get him in the 5th round. So just speaking to the team's aspect of it that I've heard before I even get into my aspect on him, I heard personally, and this is in that article that if you guys go and check that out later, is that I had heard that Darius Rush was somebody that the Colts looked at as someone they thought was going to go off the board in the 3rd. If they did not take Julius Brents in the 2nd, he was a guy they had circled as a team fit that they wanted to look at in the 3rd if they didn't go corner in the 2nd round. So they go corner in the 2nd. So they decide to pass on him in the 3rd, and they go Josh Downs, who they liked a lot as well. Come around to the 4th round, they considered him highly at both those picks. Like, he was the 3rd option of those top 2 guys. If either of them go, I think Darius Rush goes to the Colts in the 4th. Ends up not going there as well. They'd already taken the quarter earlier, so they went other needs. And we get to round 5, and he falls in their lap again. And from what I was told, they were ecstatic about him being there in the 5th round. And other than the Anthony Richardson pick, this was the pick that they did not have to spend much time on. There wasn't much debate when he was there in the 5th round. That was the guy they were taking. Darius Rush's speed, his ball skills, a converted receiver. I think his upside, and we've said it both, we think his upside is higher than Julius Brents. I think the long-term vision, if both these guys work out where I think they can work out, Darius Rush is the number 1 corner, and Julius Brents is his running mate is the corner 2. Drafted in the same class, few rounds different, but that's not a knock on Julius Brents. I just think that Darius Rush has that ability to be like that lockdown number 1 corner who can travel with the best receiver if he develops a little bit in his game, because this kid went to college as a receiver. He converted to corner during his collegiate career. Like, he's in the year 3 of being a corner. Like, this kid's potential is through the roof. And outside of the Anthony Richardson pick, Darius Rush was the pick that I was the most excited about, just because of the upside this guy has. And the Isaiah Rodgers situation pretty much makes it to where he could be starting on day 1. And as a 5th round pick, the fact that he has a better chance of starting day 1 than he has of not making the roster, that's a testament to 2 things: how good I think Darius Rush can be, and secondly, how thin the Colts cornerback room is.
I was about to say, especially the latter of the 2. But man, Darius Rush, what's not to like, about him? I think he can improve as a tackler. I don't care about that. I'm gonna be honest. Like, we're not playing a cover 2 based defense anymore, where you're asked to be physical at the line of scrimmage in the run game and muddy up and set edges and different things like that. You're not asked to do that. What you're asked to do is to get physical at the line of scrimmage, carry your receiver pretty much up the field for the most part. But Darius Rush gives you more than that. He gives you some of that mirror stuff, that you look for in a cornerback. The cornerback that can actually stay in your hip pocket, can change directions pretty well for a guy his size. And I think that's due to his receiver, background. I like him at the point of attack when the ball is in the air. That's a testament to him being a receiver. Go up there and fight for those balls in those contested catch situations. A ton of pass breakups when he was in college. He was in the SEC. Like he went against top of the notch competition week in and week out, and he always competed. He was a pretty good guy that played on the other side of him, Cam Smith, a guy that most draft nerds, draft pundits are familiar with. That's actually how I discovered Darius Rush, watching Cam Smith, seeing the other guy making plays. And I'm like, well, I probably should be checking this guy out. And then, you look at the physical profile, the athletic profile, and that's the type of profile I like to bet on when I'm evaluating cornerbacks. He just fits that mold, 6'2", right there, 200 pounds, 4.35, 4.36, 40-yard dash, can jump, has 33-inch arms, like the length is there. He has everything you can want in a cornerback. Only thing he has to improve is just his feel for playing cornerback, and that's because he's only been doing it for 3 years. So you can't even blame him for sometimes, his eyes are not right in zone, or maybe he's a little late in some of his zone coverages, but that's just because he's just so raw as a cornerback. And I think the best way to get the most out of him early is to put him out there and just see what he can do. But talking about another guy,
Well,
another
wait,
cornerback.
did we forget to mention the giant chip that's on Darius Rush's shoulders now?
Oh yeah, you can talk a little bit about that from you guys' interview, right?
I mean, if you go throw on the interview that's on the Horseshoe Huddle channel with Darius Rush this offseason, the first question I asked him was, "How are you available in the fifth round?" And he was cracking up and said he didn't know. He said he can laugh about it now, but he was pissed off on draft day.
Yeah.
That he can laugh about it now. He wasn't laughing then, but he was just pointing out that he's just going to make that a good thing. He's going to make those other teams regret it and all this other stuff. The fire this kid's going to have to that talent we already saw, this kid's not going to be complacent. You don't have to worry about that for this guy that some people are going to look at as raw because of how new he is to the corner position. He's going to have all the traits, all the physical stuff that we talked about with that motivation that he just dropped to the fifth round after. I don't know if anyone thought that was going to happen for him after the offseason he put in.
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked just to see him there. Like, just to see the draft continue to go and go. It's almost very similar to what we saw with Josh Downs. You know, we thought he'd be going long before where he went. If it wasn't late first, you'd think it'd be early second at the latest. For a guy like Josh Downs, who was in a lot of people's top 5 as far as receiver prospects. But Darius Rush, was a guy that we saw take a similar fall, and guys that I had way below him. I won't name names, but they got drafted ahead of him, man. And it was surprising to see. And I'm just glad this wasn't one of those drafts where we see guys fall to the Colts and the Colts pass on them for guys we've never heard of, or guys that we're unfamiliar with. This wasn't one of those drafts when the guys that were rated higher and evaluated higher did fall to the Colts. The Colts struck, regardless of what they had at the position, whether it was a need or not. The Colts struck, and I think this is actually this third guy that we're going to talk about, Jalen Jones, is another guy who fell way lower than I expected him to go. Another guy who started in the SEC for multiple years, and that's you want to talk about him first as a prospect. It's a lot to like about this guy, especially with where you got him, the value he could provide for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is another guy that I think there's a better chance that he is playing real defensive snaps year
Mm-hmm.
one than he does of not making the roster, and he's a seventh round pick.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that, like
crazy.
that's ridiculous. And we talked about how the Colts roster has to do with that as well. But like the amount of production that he had in college, like The first two corners we just mentioned, we love the upside there, the athleticism. Jalen Jones isn't the level of athlete those guys are. Um, but the argument can be made, and I don't even know if you can argue against it. He was the most productive of the three corners in college that we drafted.
Mm-hmm.
He allowed
Yeah.
94 passing yards last year, the least amount of passing yards of any starting corner that was in this year's draft in college last year. And he didn't play at Tulane. He didn't play in Tulsa. He played in the SEC. So going back to the SEC,
This
uh, like
stupid
this,
stuff, man.
like this was crazy stuff. And Wyatt Law mentioned this as well. Jones was only targeted 19 times last year. A
Yeah, I
part
know
of why.
his tape was boring as hell. His tape was boring as hell, and it was difficult for me to evaluate him accurately just based off last year. But you got to know that teams made that a priority, not to go at him and not to throw at him in a bunch of situations, because even when he was targeted, he wasn't giving up much of nothing.
Tough as nails corner on the outside. I mean,
Hmm.
his technique is nice. I think he's going to be farther ahead of Darius Rush and Brents in that
Yeah.
regard. Um, we talked about the chip that's on Darius Rush's shoulders. I can't imagine the chip that's on Jalen Jones' shoulders. Did not think he would be hearing his name in round 7. Fun fact: I think in our last mock draft that we did, where we let a mock draft simulator let the board fall to us,
Hmm.
I think me and you took Jalen Jones in round 3 to
Was
the
that
Colts.
was that was that round 3?
I think so. It was either round 3 or round 4, but I think it was round 3 because we did not go there in round 2, and we didn't want people crucifying us for not going
Yeah.
corner.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But we,
It's a lot to like about him, man.
exactly, I mean, very very productive corner. Not
Hmm.
the athlete that I think the Colts normally go for, but when that level of production is sitting there in round 7, I
Hmm.
understand why they kind of pushed that to the side and went with it. Now, my least favorite thing about him, who put this man in number 40? Who did that to him? Because that is the
He's
ugliest
gonna
thing.
change it. He's gonna change it.
Oh,
I
I,
pray he
if
changes it.
if it gets down to the cutting the roster down, and we have 2 people that they're considering, I say cut the one that has a better number for him. Use that as the deciding factor, because if you can't get this guy in a 30 or 20 or a single digit, I'm gonna lose my mind. Because if I have to watch Jalen Jones, who I think is gonna play snaps this year for the Colts,
Yeah.
I do. On the outside, I think he will be a rotational guy. If I have to see him on the outside wearing number 40, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yeah, Jalen Jones, man. Big guy, 6'2". I don't believe he talks about his weight. But like you say, he's not the athlete that those other guys are. And he doesn't have the length. You know, the arms, it's not as long. I believe the arms are 29 to 30 inches. And but still, he makes up for it in technique, and like the footwork is really good. He's not a burner, you know. He will get beat in certain situations when it comes to long speed. That's one of his the knocks on him. But it's not like he's a 4'6", 4'7" guy. You know, he plays pretty solid, pretty in the mid 4'5s. But I just like what he does from a technical standpoint. He's never in bad position. His footwork allows him to be right there pretty much in all contested catch situations, and he never panics, even when he is beat, which is rare in the SEC. So that's a testament to him. A couple other guys on the roster, like Wyatt Law mentioned, Dallas Flowers. This is a hell of an opportunity for him. A guy who's probably looking at starting is going to have his chances to start as well, you know, along with competing with the rookies. But a guy
Well,
that's
the other role that Isaiah Rodgers leaves, if the suspension does come to fruition like we believe it will, I mean, Flowers had some return work last year, but Flowers could really move into being like the returner for the Colts this next
I
year. I
think he
mean,
led the NFL in kick return
average.
average.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, he's an explosive returner. Has
he
that
is.
speed. I think it's what probably makes it to where he is more likely to make the roster than not as well. And the
Mm-hmm.
corner spot has some work to do as an outside corner, if he's going to play consistent snaps there. But
Mm-hmm.
as a returner, I think day one he is the biggest beneficiary to Isaiah Rodgers not being on the field and having that
Yeah.
opportunity to be there. And then you're looking at the fact if Isaiah Rodgers isn't here long term, Dallas Flowers can find himself a role with the Colts for the foreseeable future as a returner.
Yeah, man. Tony Brown is one of those. Tony Brown didn't do himself any favors today. He dropped 2 interceptions. from
He's
what I heard.
he's an elite special teamer though.
He is. He is. He didn't do himself any favors as far as getting snaps at the cornerback position today. And we have Kenny Moore, of course, the veteran of all those guys, the guy that's looking for a bounce back year, kind of like a rejuvenation. He's motivated. I do know that from speaking to several people around him, and he wants to make things right. He know last year got off to a bad start with the holdout and the contract situation, and he had not a good year. It kind of was an extension from how it ended the year before. Had a pretty rough year. I think he's going to be back playing in a contract year. Trust me, guys play well in contract seasons. So I expect him to be solid. I expect him to play well next year coming out the slot. And I don't believe we talked about Julian Blackman making a position switch. Did you
Yeah,
have any thoughts on that? I don't believe we recorded since it became official that he
we
he
haven't.
went he converted.
So we haven't recorded it. I mean, I think it makes sense because Rodney Thomas doesn't offer you much in the run game. But
Yeah.
when he was dropping back last year playing for Julian Blackman, that's where you saw, man, we got something in this kid. So moving him to
Hmm.
free safety, letting Julian Blackman kind of use his instincts, attack the ball, which is kind of what he was doing anyway at the free safety position. So
Yeah.
moving him over to the strong side, I think it makes a lot of sense. The person that probably hurts those Nick Cross, and Nick Cross believers. Nick Cross, I think his skill set makes more sense at the strong safety position. So I think Julian Blackman would have to not show himself to be like the future of that spot for Nick Cross to kind of take that over. Luckily for him and his fans, Gus Bradley does like to run a lot of three safety sets. So there is
Hmm.
still a role to have Nick Cross on the field a good amount of time this season. It'll just be interesting to see kind of how they go. But with the linebacker situation that the Colts have, I could see them using three safeties even more.
Yeah, and in those situations, Julian Blackman will sometimes come over the slot. He will come over the slot and guard slots. We seen him play in the slots in spots last year, and he's very comfortable doing that, matching up with guys, especially guys with specific kind of skill sets. And I think making him play around the line of scrimmage a little more with how good of a tackler he is, and the way he pursues and his closing speed is really good. So Julian Blackman just diagnoses the game really well for a guy with his experience. Another guy that'll be on a contract year, if I'm not mistaken. So I expect him to play really well, man. When he's healthy, he's a plus starter for you. So I have a lot of confidence in his ability to make the transition smoothly, and I think he'll be fine in that regard. I'll just say this about Nick Cross. More on Nick Cross later. Not later today, but just later in the offseason. I'll really talk about Nick Cross and what's going on with him. Maybe if I'm brave enough.
Uh oh. We're gonna put a hazard by that episode title. But I mean, I think another aspect just for these rookies and these guys
Mhm.
coming in this room that we didn't really mention, Ron Milas is a highly, highly respected defensive back coach in this league. So we have these young guys. I know some people are nervous about throwing the young guys in there. They want to vet. And while I would not be opposed to them bringing somebody in, I think where the team's at, where the roster's at, I think these young guys, this draft class is going to have a lot to do with how long this actual rebuild stage that the Colts are in is in. That I would roll with the young guys, but a guy like Ron Milas being there to help, Brent's help. Darius Rush, who both have some technical things that they're going to have to get worked out, being a little bit more raw than a guy like Jalen Jones in round 7. A guy like Ron Milas is going to be a great guy for them to be working under, learning from. So I'm really excited for that pairing and how that's worked out with the Gus Bradley staff staying on with Shane Steichen's offensive staff. But yeah, this was not an episode we wanted to have to do. This was not an episode we wanted to have to talk about, but it's
Let me
June. News came. Had to do it, guys.
let me ask you a question, because I got a feeling about to wind down in a second here. But I know I don't be, I believe somebody put out an article from Horseshoe Huddle. I can't remember who it was, but somebody discussed possible veteran free agents that can be bought
Drake,
in. Okay, yeah, it was Drake. Yeah, I think I saw you retweet it. That's how I saw it. And
probably. I think he used a couple of my tweets in it too. 'Cause
Oh,
I
okay.
put out a list of some of the best free agents that are on the market right now, and I think he
Hmm.
may have included that. But yeah, it was Drake Wally.
Yeah. So, who would you be most interested in if a veteran is what I made my stance clear from the jump that I would just prefer it to be a youth movement. But who would you prefer if a veteran had to be? If I had to, I'll just go first real quick
Yeah.
because mine's not long. If I had to go, I would rather a veteran depth piece. You know, not nobody that's gonna come in and contend for starter snaps. I would rather the young guys get the opportunity first. And if we see that these young guys just are not ready completely, like it's just his heads is spinning and they're not even learning anything, then I would go with a more competitive vet. But I would just look for a vet depth piece, me personally.
Um. So I agree. I think the running with the youth aspect, I think it's just the right time because you're going to have so many different positions that you're already doing that in. That these guys have such a big impact on your future. You got to see what you got. Um, and
Mm.
from what I've heard, Darius Rush has had a really strong OTA, so they're really excited to kind of get them into training camp. Really excited to have Julius Brents healthy at training camp. Inside the Shoe here mentions one of the guys I would think of. Casey Hayward has experience with Gus Bradley, a guy that I thought made a lot of sense last year. Looked like he lost a step this past year, so I
I
don't
was
think he's a
about to
guy.
say, yeah, I
I don't.
watched him play in those Atlanta games. Whew,
So
it's
I, I
rough.
don't I don't think I would go to say that he would come in and be an automatic starter, but having a
Mhm.
vet in the room that's played in this system to kind of help these young guys, like that could make a lot of sense. I think if I had to go through and say like the corners that I like the most on the market, just to kind of bring up.
Breaking news: Destin said the Colts are signing Richard Sherman.
Whoa,
They need a
yeah,
veteran presence that's familiar with Gus Bradley's system.
you got to go get a guy that has some just experience. Casey Hayward is definitely one. Fabian Moreau, I put him out there as well. He's coming off a pretty strong year. Another guy that isn't young by any means in the
Mhm.
NFL, so you don't have to like make your when you're signing a player June 7th, you're not really putting much stock into it to where it has to last long. But
Mhm.
if they feel like the 6, 7 that they're going to keep, that they would rather have another vet in the room if the Isaiah Rodgers situation goes. I understand it, but I think going to getting somebody with some familiarity with the system makes sense. So Casey Hayward probably the top of my list as well, just because of that, and because when I saw of him last year, he is not going to play at a level that you have to have him on the field by any means. But we
Mhm.
do know that Gus favors the guys that know his system. Um, so that's the con to bringing a guy like Casey Hayward in.
Yeah. So if you want to see some of those young guys get opportunities, you probably want to stop pushing for those vets because we do know that Gus Bradley has the ability to play some of those vets over the young guys that should be getting snaps.
Where is Face on back in Vegas?
Yes, he is. And right now, looking at Vegas depth chart, he is a projected starter for next season.
This guy, he just knows what to do. He is a businessman. Gotta respect that.
He's
Gotta
smart, man.
respect that. But I mean, looking at the corner room right now before we head out, if you had to name don't bring a vet in. You have to keep six. If you're keeping six, you're probably looking in no order, so no one get upset with me in the comments. I'm gonna say Darius Rush first because I want to. Darius Rush first, Julius Brents, Kenny Moore, Jalen Jones, Dallas Flowers. I mean Tony, and probably Tony Brown because of his special
Special
teams work.
special teams too, yeah. So
So
some
that
of those guys are gonna have to play special teams. That's another thing too, which how another guy can sneak on to the roster, or one of these rookies get moved to the practice squad if there's a guy like Jalen Jones who may not get defensive snaps right away. He has to be willing to play special teams. Like Darius Rush is a really good special teamer. Like he loves special teams. He's outstanding on special teams. So, but he may get so many defensive snaps, he may never play special teams. The way this roster is shaping out to be, he's this team is so thin at cornerback, he may never play special teams. So that's a real possibility. But that's another way for you to sneak out a roster spot and sneak on to this team.
Yep, just play corner. If you want to make the Colts roster right now, play corner.
It's that simple. I may give it a tryout. I
Hey,
missed the open tryout, but I think I can make a 90-man roster for the Indianapolis Colts.
it's possible.
I mean, we
Anything,
we did have
any.
Brandon Faison. I mean, how much worse can I be? Honestly.
Gus Bradley would play Brandon Faison over you, though. No doubt in my mind.
I'm 6'1". I have the length. I have the height. I'm not gonna tackle anybody. I'm letting you know that now. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna
Strictly
tackle anybody.
coverage.
Yeah, I'm a coverage
You
guy.
better you better have a safety over top for any
Oh
time
yeah,
Shaad's
that's
in
another
coverage.
thing too. That's another thing too. I'm only good in red zone. Red zone defending fades specifically. I only could guard one type of route.
Corner is my favorite position to watch, but if I was
Mhm.
playing corner, a lot of yellows coming my way. Lots of yellows. In the NFL, it's a spot foul. If I was in college,
Mhm.
I'd break records. I'd break records with the amount of pass interferences I'd have.
Okay, quickly before we head out. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited were you when you read that tweet about Anthony Richardson throwing a 60-yard touchdown today? How were you? Come
Um,
on, let's be honest. Let's be honest.
Probably like a 6. I don't get too much. I don't get too hyped into the OTAs. I think I
Okay.
would have loved if they would have sent a video, just seeing him throw the ball more. I'm shocked that the Colts haven't played into that with some of their OTA stuff yet. Like we haven't seen as much. They
Yeah.
posted that picture of him jumping uber high.
Oh
So
yeah.
they,
Uh-huh.
they 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 put that one out, but I'm shocked that we haven't seen more Anthony Richardson throwing stuff. But they might want to be chilling expectations until training camp and kind of letting this buzz a little bit just inside the building. So I guess I get it, but just from a marketing perspective, I just want to see the 60-yard bomb.
Yeah, Colts are not playing the click game because they could be so clickbaity right now, but and they choosing to take the high road.
The Titans posted a
Boo.
Malik Willis bomb to Derrick Henry today.
Wait, what? I
Yeah,
didn't even see. I didn't see
if you go
that.
to the Titans Twitter, they posted a video of Malik Willis throwing a deep ball to Derrick Henry.
Titans signing Titans pursuing DeAndre Hopkins. It's just the most.
The Tennessee Titans are the
They
most
blow my
confusing
mind with the way they
franchise.
operate. Like, oh my god.
The Tennessee Titans, I put a tweet out today about it, but the Tennessee Titans have operated this offseason equally as a team that is interested in rebuilding and a team that's interested in adding vets to play now. They tore their offensive line up, just tore it up.
Destroyed it.
Um, and it was not a great offensive line last year, but they got rid of some of the good ones. I mean, Ben Jones is a good center, gone.
Yeah.
Nate Davis signed elsewhere. And then we have they
Tell
drafted
tell yeah.
Taylor Lewan is
Hmm.
kind of retired, not retired though.
But bringing in Andre Dillard,
Yeah, they signed Andre Dillard.
that's
Um,
not good.
he got a contract. He got a contract and a half. But hey, good for him. Always good to get your money. But so
Oh boy.
signing DeAndre Hopkins would be interesting. But if you're D Hop, why? Why would
This
you go
has
to
to be
Tennessee?
leverage.
I mean, I don't know
It's
because
like when you're flirting with the girl you don't really like, to make the girl that you like get a little jealous.
but do you get an Odell contract in June? I don't think he does.
No, I mean
It's just
maybe.
late. It's just late in the game. If he wanted to keep that
Yeah,
contract, he should have found a way to. I mean, he probably got a good amount of that contract when he was released by the Cardinals anyway. So
he
it's not like
did.
he needs to make money year one. So just go sign with Kansas City or Buffalo. Chill out. Like
I know.
just
Just
go
to go
just go do
total
the right.
obliteration and go to
If you want
Kansas
to
City.
if you want to go back to Houston because of like Mims, I mean, that would make more sense than going to Tennessee.
Oh no, I would definitely understand the Houston thing. Especially now that Bill O'Brien's gone. Like when they said the Patriots were pursuing him, it was no way DeAndre Hopkins was going to go back and play for Bill O'Brien in no capacity. I don't care if he's the head coach, assistant head coach, offensive coordinator. It was never
Defensive
going to
coordinator.
happen.
We know how the
You
we know
never,
how the
you
we know
never
how the
know.
Patriots we know how the Patriots like to hire people to do other jobs. So
Oh man. Um, there was nothing else that really stood out to me from what was talked about in the news circuit and in OTAs today. So I think we're gonna pretty much clip this one right here. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention before we get up out of here?
I just want to remind everybody that while the Isaiah Rodgers situation impacts the Colts and the football world and fandom, this is a person. This is a guy that we have no idea what was going on in the situations that have been going on for him. I've seen a lot of ugly things fed on social media. There's a lot of people showing some ugly colors, and I just don't want that to be a thing that is running through this fan base. This fan base has a lot of love. This fan base has a lot of pride, but let's direct it in the right places and not kicking a guy while he's down. Um, he 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 knows everything you want to say to him. He knows he's thought about himself. I'm sure. Let this all play out. Let this guy be a person, make mistakes. It's part of life. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we put that out there. Athletes are people, not just people on your favorite team.
Yeah, he's more than just a name on the depth chart. Uh, yeah, man, I think that was well said. Pretty much echoes how I feel, and I hate that it came up again because now we have to end the show on such a somber note.
Hey, we're ending it on a note that I want everybody to remember. Remember those words and act it on your life. If you're watching, some of you have said some asinine things in my DMs about this statement. So,
Oh,
um,
whoa,
just
yeah, your
just
DMs is it's
so
bad.
just yeah, so just take that to heart. And if you are some of the people that have been just throwing some crazy things around about it, you know who you are.
Yeah, man. We will see you guys next week. Appreciate y'all for showing up and checking out the show. We definitely will be back to discuss more Colts related things. We will holler at y'all. Peace.